And I forgot to unmute my mic. So, hi, John Morgan here with Bob's Marketing Greenhouses. And welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live, our weekly show right here on the internet. And well, this week what I wanted to do was kind of revisit previous episodes of Bob's Live that we've done throughout kind of the winter time. Because I did a lot of houseplant related stuff early on this season, and I thought it would be great to take a look back at some of those projects and see how they're progressing, because a lot of them I have right here in my office. So this week it's going to be a little bit shorter of an episode because I'm actually working on some stuff for later episodes. But I wanted to start off today with the little terrarium that I made. Or actually, before I do that, let's go in chronological order. Okay, so the very first episode of Bob's Live that we did this year, I planted this guy behind me. It's a fiddle leaf fig. And you can actually kind of see where I transplanted it, because all of this growth down here is older growth, and where I have it positioned in my office is right next to the windows, and all of this new growth up here has come out since I transplanted it. So you can see that the older leaves down here at the bottom, there's a lot more space between them, and where these leaves up here are exposed to brighter light, they're growing more compact and there's more of them coming out. So it is progressing along really great. And I also noticed that since transplanting it, the leaf size is different. So down here at the bottom of the plant, the leaves are a lot smaller. Up here at the top, I've got some gigantic leaves. I mean, that leaf is the size of my hand. So this guy, he's growing really good. And before you know it, fiddle leaf figs, they can get really tall. So if you have a fiddle leaf fig and it gets too tall, it's safe just to take a pair of scissors or nippers and just kind of lop the top off of it. And what that'll do is it'll trigger it to branch out, but it'll also kind of keep it short and compact, because these guys over time, they can get pretty big for a house plant. I mean, they are a tree after all. After we did the fiddle leaf fig video, the next week, because I used, let me grab it here, I used these stones around the bottom of the fiddle leaf fig, and the container that the stones came in was this container. And in fact, some of the stones are still there in the bottom of it. I'm using it for drainage. But I made this terrarium out of the container. And actually, I stuck the date here on top of it. So I don't know if you can see that. It might be hard to see. But it says January 7th of 2020. So that's when I created this little miniature terrarium. Right here on an episode of Bob's Live. So if you jump back in the videos, I think this might have been episode 2 maybe, where we did this. But it is growing great, and all the materials to make this came right out of the front yard here in front of the office. So you can go back and look at the video of how this was made. It's both on Facebook here, and then it's also over on our YouTube channel, just as its own separate little project video. So right now, if you're cooped up inside and you have kids, this is a great little project to do because you can do it with found materials. So I went out and collected some moss, and I didn't know it at the time, but there happened to be this little weed growing in the moss. And it's kind of vining its way up and around in here. That actually has a little white bloom on it. But yeah, it's still growing great. The moss has kind of covered up the little bits of decoration that I put in the bottom of it. It had that little twig and then some decorative rocks in there. And the moss has kind of grown up and covered all of that. And it's also kind of cool to look at the root growth inside of it. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but you can see the roots from like this little weed making their way down through the soil and into the water reservoir at the bottom. Other than cleaning up the sides of this from time to time, and also trimming back this weed as it gets bigger, I really haven't had this thing open that much, and I haven't watered it since I made it. So terrariums, they are a great low maintenance choice. If you tend to kill houseplants, but you want houseplants, I recommend experimenting around with terrariums. The next episode, or a few episodes later, I showed you how you can start pothos from a cutting. And in the video, I took the cutting and started it in some water, but I never showed you the finished result. So this is that pothos now, and you can see all of these roots coming off of it. So you can see the original green stem there, and then those dark little lines, those are the roots coming off. And this guy, he's just about ready to be transplanted, so we'll have to transplant him over into a pot pretty soon. But again, if you have pothos at home, this is a great way to propagate it. In fact, I've got here in my office, I don't want to go grabbing all of these, but I've got the original container of pothos up on top of my bookshelf. I have another pot of it down on the floor. And then over here on my little writing desk, I have another one. And this guy, it's sort of vining out and across the top of my desk. So I've got those all over the place. And whoa, we just went out of focus. Hello. There we go. This pot, it's a really cool pot because it has two separate chambers in it. So there's a little bit of water left in the bottom of that. I need to give this guy a drink. But it has this outer chamber where you put water, and then the inner one here is porous, so the water soaks through and waters the plant. And this pothos plant just loves this container. And I probably went out of focus again. Yep. So those are some quick updates on some projects that I have going here in my office. I've also got the avocado tree and the money tree from last year that I started. The avocado, it's growing pretty good. In fact, it's about a year old now. And then also the money tree that I did last spring. It's about a year old at this point. And they're both growing great. I just didn't want to drag them over because they weigh a ton. And yeah. So I'm looking over at the comments, and yeah, it looks like we've got quite a few people watching this evening. Really, that is all that I have for today. I just kind of wanted to do some quick updates on these. And then before I go, I wanted to share a little bit about our podcast. So each year during the gardening season, we do a 10-episode podcast called the Keep Growing Podcast. And I've got the kind of the ad for this season up now. And here in the next, I think the next week, so probably this coming Monday, I'm going to release the first episode of it. This year, I had to kind of switch up my plans for the podcast because of everything that's going on. I had a bunch of in-person interviews lined up, and I was going to do in-person interviews. and then also shoot video that I could use here on Bob's Live. But all that sort of fell through because I had the interviews planned for March and April. So, something that's really in demand right now is vegetable gardening. So on this season of the Keep Growing podcast, we're going to be looking at vegetable gardening with a little bit of a classic twist on it. So I'm going to head in to a video about that, and I'm going to tell you, until next time, keep growing.
What's that? A message coming in over the wireless? It says, grow a victory garden now. Why, that's the ticket. We'll have food security in the midst of this global pandemic with a victory garden. If only there were one of those newfangled internet podcasts to help us keep growing.
Hi, John Morgan here with the Keep Growing podcast. Join us this season as we learn how to grow a modern victory garden. Learn more at bobsmarket.com/keepgrowing. And you can subscribe on all the major podcast platforms. Let's keep growing to victory. You're still watching? I'm done. Well, since you're still here, head over to bobsmarket.com and check out our website. We've got some really cool stuff over there, like the Keep Growing podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, smash that notification bell, and all that stuff. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.